right now where we have a fireside chat looking at ZK and AI integration in real-world scenarios. So with Lagrange, featuring Ismael, and then with LazAI, featuring Ming. So very excited to be hosting this discussion.
Thank you both so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we can first start off on something very broad, just on how you two see the convergence of AI and ZK and how that's being applied respectively to your projects.
Okay, let me start. The convergence of ZK and AI as today's summit title. I think the future is all about making blockchain, mainstream. So in order to do that, we need to sort of come out of this comfort zone of just doing financial apps, right? Because consensus is expensive, and blockchain was designed in a very low capacity kind of way. So obviously, it's very difficult to do AI-related apps. Not even like regular apps, like with blockchain, with consensus, everything. Or you can give up all that. You can give a little bit decentralization, and this is all really kind of like a hybrid approach. Many already doing it in a practical way. I can't blame them, but it's been like 2 decades, since we first have the world's first decentralized, system resistant, Bitcoin, right? The first app. Going to the future, if it just stays this way, even Satoshi's original vision it's not achieved, right? Nobody is using Bitcoin for transaction, right? So it's becoming a very expensive, static asset, right? Although it's becoming very mainstream. So that is kind of sad. I would like in the future that every application is decentralized by default and also performant. So basically, basically the cake and also be able to eat it. So ZK and AI both had come like a long way and getting really good lately, right? So AI and LLM, we have all these powerful models that can almost pass, I think maybe already passed like an AGI test. And ZK also becoming, just in a couple of days, like we're even been talking about real-time proving for Ethereum, right? That's something that's gonna be really practical for ZK to be a kind of commodity kind of way for developers to adopt. So of course, combine the two very demanding tasks. Combine them will be more difficult. So a lot of corner cutting, a lot of optimization is still being needed, but the trend all points to this convergence that the two sort of like the future of future of technology will be on the horizon, which is very closely approaching us.
That was a great answer. I told a story earlier today, and so I know you both have heard it. And for anyone in the audience who has heard it, please bear with me. I'm going to tell it again. But I founded Lagrange 4 years ago. It was a VK company. And at the point that I founded Lagrange, there was one application anyone was paying for in ZK. And that was verifiable EVM block space, right? ZK rollups. And there were two teams doing that. There was Polygon and there was ZK Sync, effectively. Now we're 4 years later. I've been to a dozen ZK conferences. I've got to travel the whole world talking about ZK. And there's now 30 companies that are in ZK that are selling a product. And they all do the same thing still. Verifiable EVM block space. Now, I don't consider that to be a very bright-looking future for the technology that I spent 4 years of my life working on. So what I like about ZK AI is that it's different. We're here today and we're talking about ZK for deepfakes and classification to detect deepfakes, classification to detect illicit content. We're talking about ZK for financial applications, for healthcare. right? We're talking about the application of diagnostic models, of agentic and citizen science, a bunch of stuff that aren't just ZK EVM block space. That is what I think ZKML offers. It is a fundamentally transformative technology developed and financed in crypto that will reach outside of crypto, as very few technologies financed in crypto have, and will transform traditional sectors from healthcare to defense to aerospace to TradFi.
Yeah, absolutely. And from what I'm hearing here, this kind of convergence will provide this bridge that enables ZK to be applied for many different industries that we don't really see too much of today. So it's a very, very exciting, very exciting time that we're in right now. And I wanted to also ask you a bit more about some of the challenges that you both are addressing with this convergence. So on Ismael, on Lagrange's side, you're focused more on the verifiability of these model inferences. So I'm curious to hear more about what sort of dangers may arise, especially as our AI capabilities increase, especially as we're on our way to an era of artificial superintelligence. So what kind of dangers may arise if we don't have a way to cryptographically guarantee model behavior? And on Ming's side, with LazAI focusing on data misalignment and governance, was wondering on that side why you see these areas as the first step for what you're addressing.
Yeah, I'll start. So, yeah, I mean, I think you put it very well. One of the problems in AI that I think Lagrange initially focuses very heavily on is verifiability of inference. So you have an arbitrary model used from anything for a trading bot on chain to a diagnostic model used in a major hospital. And you want to have privacy and veracity of the result of the inference. And you can get that with deep proof. And we think that is a real 0 to 1 for what's possible today. A lot of the ZKML tooling that's available is experimental, it's scientific, it's cool, it's an academically interesting piece of technology, but it isn't commercially viable. Deep Proof aspires to be and is working to be the first commercially relevant ZKML protocol for inference. And from there, obviously, we'll naturally are targeting other use cases in AI that we can generate proofs for. Things like fine-tuning, things like explainability and interpretability, things like fairness of models to prove the lack of an inherent bias, a bunch of other areas that you need. And so as we're barreling forward, and to your point, towards this future of superintelligence, right, where we're in this machine age where every aspect of our life is augmented by AI, we'll be moving towards that with guardrails established through cryptography, just as we established guardrails for the internet through cryptography.
Right. Since I'm here wearing two hats, right? One for ZK, one for AI. ZK for ZKM, which is developing a ZKVM called ZKMIPS. And LazAI is developing a new framework for blockchain called point of view data and individual-centric DAO, all governance models that will be very central to the challenge of a decentralized AI, right? Actually, I would sort of going from a more circumferential philosophical point of view, because technology here is I think in a sense it's secondary, because we have all this compute power concentrated in several big corps. They can definitely, I actually don't doubt it, they can build AI side. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, I'm not some odd man, but if he say next year, I would believe him, right? And the implementation for that is where's the human in this AI side future, right? All of your jobs are threatened, and all of your secrets are not going to be secret. Let me give an example why that is the case. Meta used to rely on all this data collected from Apple, right? Apple devices, and Apple just took them away. So they lost all that private data, but then they just trained their large language model, train their AI model, right? Probably not large language model, but and their AI system is actually better than the actual private data they collected from Apple devices. So I'm fully convinced the AI side is going to be much better, not much better, much better than humans. So to deal with that kind of future, kind of defend the position of humans in a society that AI side is lurking on top of us, right? I think new kind of economic models need to be we need to rethink all of that. And crypto, as it kind of began as a decentralized economic systems, kind of takes everyone can just come in without censorship. That is something we want, but it is being kind of contaminated by the centralized finance that is, right? If we kind of already achieved that, you will just trade in Bitcoin, right? How much Bitcoin is worth actually doesn't matter. So that being said, in a world that AI is not just part of what our daily life, but it's actually overpowering each individual, we need a system to set boundary for AI, right? To kind of make it like equal to human. So in that way, I actually think this is where the technology for example, zero knowledge proof and what LazAI is also promoting, the very important decentralized governance model, individual-centric DAO, and point of view data, because not all of your data are equal, right? So this will actually greatly reduce the demand for compute. So you would be able to kind of run AI and AI models in a very decentralized way, right? You take out all that heavy compute of the big large language models, because everyone does not need to carry like an encyclopedia like every large language will do today, right? So yeah, so I won't here like go into technical details, but these are the things I think these projects are valuable to the mainstream technology, which doesn't really concern with this because they have all the power, all the data, and it seems like they just need to add the big compute, big data, and that is going to be countered by small data, small model, and a lot of proof, a lot of validation, and those technologies are absolutely necessary. If you think AI can just going on like this without the aid of Web3 to set those boundaries for AIs, we're running into a very bleak future. So yeah, that's what I think of the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that ties back to a lot of what you said before about making decentralization kind of the default setting. And Ismael, we talked earlier about making privacy and verifiability the default setting. So soon we'll have all of these different features as almost built in, something that users don't really have to implement themselves or even think about doing it. It's just there for them from the start. And I think that's really powerful. I also wanted to dive more into some of the unique advantages or the unique value proposition behind what LazAI and Lagrange is building with Deep Proof, and specifically some advantages that are enabled to the end developers and the developer experience. So for Ming on LazAI's side, LazAI, one of its developments that your guys are currently building is Alith. And was wondering about some of the unique advantages that Alith provides to developers that maybe aren't enabled with other AI agent frameworks that currently exist. And for Ismael on Deep Proof side, I know that you previously mentioned some caveats with other existing ZKML libraries, and in previous sessions you really emphasized the speed up improvements that Deep Proof has been seeing. So I was wondering if you both could dive more into some of those unique advantages specifically for any developers in the audience.
Right. So if you think from people like first principle thinking, right? So if you think from first principle way, it's very hard to kind of make the mainstream AI into a very decentralized model, because obviously you can't run everything on a single node, right? Or that single node can be the single node, right? The only node, because it's only a few can build that super like data center, right? $2 billion data center. How many nodes can you build like that? So what LazAI is trying to do is to make small models actually useful, right? So nowadays, small models are kind of modeled as a reduced version of large models. So you will know that, this model will be less powerful than the sort of like a full-blood kind of model. So LazAI's point of view data is actually making live continuous data a stable, right? Not just the addition to complement the large language models, but it's kind of like a dynamic, continuous learning kind of model. And to do that, we actually need to reduce a lot of complexities. The traditional large language models are trained. So in that way, new paradigms of syncing data is also needed. So at LazAI, we don't sync data at this. You don't need all the data, right? Also, you don't need all the world's data, right? You only need the data that's relevant to you and relevant to you, your community, and also it's live, it's continuous, right? You need to keep updating the model with the live data. So in that way, you and your community can build these powerful live small models that actually can distinctly be different from one another. So you will have a network of nodes that will have unique small models and provide unique capabilities and sort of true intelligence, not like just big machine intelligence. So that's the way we try to provide value, and that's the way we see the future of AI.
I love that answer. Now, as a final point, and I'll keep it brief. I touched on a few times today, as you brought up, just the raw performance improvements that DeepProve has been able to generate compared to alternative solutions. I mean, we put out benchmarks internally that showed DeepProve was 158 times faster than our closest competitor. I mean, the breakthrough. And the closest competitor came out and argued and said it wasn't that fast. Then the independent benchmarks came out and we were 750 times faster, and the closest competitor was silent. So I think there's a value you get from going down the first principles, building everything from scratch, developing a team laser focused on building the best experience for verifying machine learning inferences possible. Cryptography from scratch, fundamental research, world-class developer experience, and easy to use so that no developer in AI ever has to think about how they can add verifiability or privacy again. They get it by default. That's what DeepProve does. And I'm excited for the rest of this year to see and share more about what our research is going to be doing.
Awesome. Really love the vision that both of you guys have. And I also wanted to ask you both about some of the architectural design considerations that you made in designing both DeepProve and then also LazAI. So on LazAI's side, as you mentioned, Ming, there's the individual-centric DAOs, and then there's also your own data anchoring token that LazAI created, as well as a marketplace. So I was wondering about some of the considerations or the role that these components have in addressing biases, hallucinations within AI outputs. And on Ismael's side, for DeepProve, was also wondering about some of the design considerations that were made in building your own ZKML library, as well as any kind of trade-offs that you had to face in the process.
Why don't you start first?
Of course. So yeah, DeepProve was developed from scratch, built with GKR, SumCheck, LogUp. That's what makes it hyper performant. GPU support coming very, very soon, which will add another 100x on top of the already 3 orders of magnitude speed up compared to comparables. And yeah, I mean, the design considerations were really how do we build something no matter the cost, no matter the time required, that was as performant and fast as possible, right? We can't treat ZKML like, a secondary application in ZK. We can't just go and say the only thing ZK is useful for is Ethereum block space, and we might just go use the same tools for verifiable ML. You have to target ZKML as your principal application and develop something from ground up with research, with engineering, and then commercialization to match the value and the significance of the AI space. And that's what we've done with Deep Proof. And obviously, there's design trade-offs, there's considerations over latency and cost. It's still larger than we want it to be, right? It's still more expensive to prove inference than it is to run inference outright. But we are hyper-focused on closing that gap over the next 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, impressive. So for LazAI, it's as I mentioned earlier, we kind of developed some of the fundamental different approach to a lot of problems in both blockchain and AI development. So as Alice mentioned, I'll kind of just discuss two of them. The individual-centric DAO, we call them IDAO, and DAT, which is data anchor token. So individual-centric DAO was actually, being kind of sort of like developed very early, way before LazAI. It's kind of a central concept of Metis. So, which is kind of look at DAO from a opposite direction, right? Current DAO is, O stands for like organization, right? So it's decentralized autonomous organization, but think of it, it's not actually that decentralized in point of view of organization point of view, right? It's from a blockchain point of view, obviously, right? It's decentralized in the sense that everything lives on the blockchain and operating autonomously with smart contracts. But the O in DAO is not decentralized. It's still centralized because you still have a boundary. And whenever you have something that has a boundary, it goes against decentralization because with boundaries, you need access control. And fundamentally, right, decentralization, I'm really sorry. Sorry about that. True decentralized system, right, it's not compatible with something that needs access control. So not compatible with boundary, right? So individual-centric DAO, then how do you get rid of boundaries? If you get rid of boundary, then there's no organization because by definition, organization is a quite centralized concept, right? So individual centralized DAO doing it from the opposite side. So if we can't, just abolish the boundary, how about we shrink the boundary and shrink the boundary to the individual? So that way the boundary kind of disappeared by being like prevalent, right? It's everyone has a boundary, and you know what? When boundary contracts to the individual, you know what that is? That's privacy. So privacy is a boundary. It's a personal individual boundary that protects you, right? That's privacy. So in a framework of individual-centric DAO, the boundary disappears and the organization becomes a label, a mark, a tag. So this way, you see it another way, right? So instead of access control or access management, the individual has the ultimate control. So I don't need permit to join any group. I just tag them. I just mark them. So I'm already part of that individual. So this is the other way to do group or organization in a decentralized fashion. That is actually already being sort of like touched upon by certain very old protocols. For example, Stellar consensus protocol, it has this concept called quorum slice. So everyone can decide their own quorum slice. And the combination of tags that being selected by the same individual, and that can form a quorum slice, which is very similar to individual-centric committee. And and then by that, individual-centric DAO. So this is another way of solving the problem of. So what does this solve? This is important because this way, people can naturally form a kind of data regime, data domain that's only relevant to them. So by this, you can develop something called a fractal consensus, right? Because in the data-centric blockchain, you don't need a global consensus, and this will massively reduce the need for compute, massively reduce the task to kind of organize the data, right? Because it's very difficult to tell if this data is fake or anything. But with a individual-centric DAO-based data regime or data domain, this problem, naturally being, greatly reduced. The other concept is also related to this is so a IDAO-based data regime can develop something called data that's tied to that IDAO, and then you can issue a token by it. This is called a data anchored token, and data anchored token is kind of like NFT, right? But in the sense that it's dynamic, and also it's very flexible, and also it's continuous. So so those are the sort of technology points of LazAI.
Thank you, Ming, and thank you, Ismael, as well. And just as a last question before we close, just very briefly, we talked a lot about kind of the advantages that come with the convergence of ZK and AI, but there's still some skepticism towards some people believing that ZK is not really a means to achieve this trust minimization, but instead it's transferring trust from one model, so like an AI-based model, to another, which is the prover. So in this case, how can we go about with building systems that don't facilitate just the transfer of trust, but instead help to redefine this new paradigm?
Yeah, it's a great question. I know we're running low on time, so I'll keep this really brief. Shot clock answer. I would say that you aren't transferring trust. What you're doing is you're verifying the correctness of the computation. So you're just inheriting trust from whatever the model is. So you're just further trusting the correctness of the model's inference. And so if the model's designed poorly, if there's not explainability, if there's not interpretability, if there's not all the relevant properties you want, you don't get much. The model's designed properly, ZK ensures that nobody can compromise the correctness of the inference.
That's a good answer. I would give the same answer. Actually, I don't have anything more to add to that because that is ZK, because I'm also from the ZK VM camp. So I know all of this is true. So nothing to add to that, but let me just add a little bit like about people think of trust, right? So you have centralized trust and decentralized trust, right? What's the difference between them? Right? Decentralized trust, we usually call them trustless trust, right? So it's trustless, but it's actually a form of trust by not being able to trust. And trustless trust relies on proofs, right? So that's why we have this called ZK zero knowledge proof. So zero knowledge provides two kind of property, right? One is of course privacy, right? You don't need to review any information, but you know that information is truthful, right? Another way is that that is being used is that it can also achieve something called succinctness, because you condense all that computation, all that in the very small proof, and that will greatly reduce the cost of trust, right? Network, everything, consensus, they're very costly. So that is what zero knowledge proof can achieve.
Yeah, thank you both for this panel discussion. Very, very great to see all of these strides that are being made in marrying these two concepts together, in marrying ZK and AI and those real world use cases that can be built from it. So thank you so much, both of you, for this discussion.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us here today.
Thank you, everyone.
This is the last talk of the day, and so I think it's fitting that Alice, who moderated I think the most panels, and me and Ming, who did the most speaking engagements, closed it out. And so I guess as a final word, I just want to say is that I think this is the first major conference I've ever seen for ZKXAI, and I don't think it'll be the last.
I hope it's not the last.
A very exciting future ahead of us.
Right? Yeah.
many more to come. And thank you everyone for sticking around. And we had an amazing turnout for today's session. We're all very happy about that. So I hope all of you guys took away something from this. All of these talks are being recorded and live streamed. So if you missed any of the sessions, you can always view the recordings. But thank you so much again, everyone, for being here.
Let's do it. Thank you, House of ZK. Thank you, ZKM. Thank you, all of our friends who sponsored.